Conditions May Apply by CinnamonPinedcones. Read by Distracted by Books. Chapter 44. Guess who's back? Back again. My depression. And it's my depression that's back, but also Ivy. This was getting ridiculous. He'd stayed home from patrol for only 6 days when he had a third-degree burn spanning half his torso, and he was on day 4 of being benched for this dinky little pinprick. The skin had been healing up fine. His flesh was no longer in twain. He could probably use the extra support the stitches provided for a while yet, but he was going to lose his mind at this rate. He was taking them out tomorrow, and that was that. If Eraser didn't want him back until the stitches were gone, then he'd have his wish. He could throw some butterfly bandages over it for insurance. Ivy, expect me back. I'm taking the stitches out tomorrow. Eraserhead, isn't that a little bit early? It's only been 4 days. Ivy, and it will have been 5 tomorrow. The recommended time that stitches should remain in place. Eraserhead, yeah, the minimum recommended time. You got stabbed, Ivy. Ivy, it's happened before, and it will happen again. I will be back tomorrow. Eraserhead, that does not make it any better. Ivy, don't care. See you tomorrow. How did people just take breaks all the damn time? This was exhausting. Shota was sitting across the table lesson planning for the upcoming semester with Hisashi when he checked his phone and groaned before dropping his head onto the table. Well, that had to be Ivy then, didn't it? You good, Sho? He asked politely. Shota just continued groaning on the table. I'm guessing that was Ivy, they pushed. Shota gave an affirmative grunt. What'd they do this time? They're taking the stitches out tomorrow. Told me to expect them back. Sho responded directly into the tabletop. Are you surprised? He poked back. That they waited this long? Yes. Doesn't mean I'm happy about it. He responded as he picked up his head and downed the remainder of his coffee. Sho, I know you don't want to hear it, but they lasted nearly a whole year without you. That doesn't happen on pure luck, especially not in the red lights. They're still kicking after that. They can handle themselves, and with you around, they're only getting better. Have some faith in them and calm down, he tried to soothe. Sho just glared at them and went to go brew himself another mug. Get me one too, Sho. Despite the glare, he still took their cup. Usually, Shota left straight from UA to meet with Ivy. He'd stay late and do some work around the school or take a nap and head out. There wasn't really enough time to justify going all the way home, so he usually didn't bother. It was in the opposite direction from uptown, so he'd have to double back, and with travel time, he'd only spend like half an hour at home before he had to leave again. But consequently, he'd usually show up like half an hour early and just wait around. He didn't mind. It was nice to have a moment to himself. UA was never really quiet. Not that the city was either, but distant car horns were easier to ignore than students screaming and setting the training gym on fire for the 3rd time in a single semester. Now that it was summer, he was showing up at a more reasonable time, and today Ivy was there waiting for him, passing the time by throwing their knives into the brick wall that now only had loose shreds of cardboard clinging to it. He really should bring a new piece to put up there. Actually, he should bring an actual target, because Ivy was going to start chipping straight through the wall at this rate. Evening, Ivy, he greeted. Hey, geezer, did ya miss me? they shot back without even turning to look at him. Mm-hmm, he replied as dryly as possible. How's your leg? Restless. It's a syndrome. Kind of rude of you to bring it up. I'm sensitive about it, you know. Ivy, answer the damn question. He interrupted their prattling. They finally turned to face him just to roll their eyes. It's fine, Eraser. It's been fine, they replied, sounding as exasperated as he felt. Can I check it? He asked. If I had a nickel for every time you asked me to take my clothes off, I'd have 2 nickels, which isn't a lot, but it's weird that it happened twice, especially coming from someone who thinks I'm a kid. Seems a little suspect, if you ask me. Yep, that's about the response he expected. Regardless, he still had to take a deep breath to keep himself from throwing an already injured child off the roof. Kid, you better hope you don't split that open, because if you do, I'm dragging you to a doctor, he threatened. Reopening the wound doesn't help me or Uptown, Eraser. I'm not trying to screw up my own leg. If it splits, I'll go to your cryptic little doctor friend, but it won't, 'cause it's fine. My leg, my problem, so butt out of it. If it becomes something I can't handle, I promise I'll come crawling back to you. Okay? They quipped with so much sass that it was almost impressive. They ran through a few spars, and Ivy's skill didn't seem to be suffering. They guarded their leg more carefully, and a practiced fighter might be able to pick up on it. But otherwise, they seemed fine. Maybe he was just being overprotective. They clearly knew how to care for the wound when they got it. Pushing the topic and treating them like they couldn't handle themselves wasn't going to help anything. If he wanted them to trust him, then he was going to have to trust them. They took the food he offered when they needed it, so he had to trust that they'd take the aid he offered if they needed it. Not that he would admit it, but Zashi was probably right. The kid could handle himself. Ivy was definitely aware of the half-healed wound in their leg during patrol. It pulled, and that didn't feel great, but it was fine. Eraser had his panties in a twist about it, just like they knew he would, and honestly, it was exhausting. They can understand the concern, but they knew what they were doing. If they can get themselves through getting stabbed in the gut and left to bleed out in a dirty alleyway on their own, then they can handle a little letter opener to the leg. He offered them a fancy healer. If they needed it, they'd take it. Their pride didn't come before Uptown, and Uptown's well-being was heavily contingent on their well-being. True, they might be a little reckless with themselves, but only when it could save other people, and it doesn't help anyone if they put themselves out of commission again. It was niggling their mind on the walk home that night. Eraser worried about them too much, and they didn't know how to feel about that. Was that how people were supposed to be? Is that how everyone else was treated? It felt like they'd been jumping through hoops to dodge everyone's concerns lately. Well, just Eraser and the Shinsos. Not everyone. No, everyone else couldn't give 2 shits about his well-being. It was just those 3 that cared. And they were the only people in his life that didn't know he was quirkless. 1 or 2 is a coincidence, but 3 is a trend. The thought hit him with force and stopped him mid-stride. It's not something he didn't already know, but for some reason it found its way through a chink in his armor and struck him like a dawning realization. He had put the pieces together long ago, but it's like he was only now seeing the whole picture. It was stupid. He was never under any disillusion that they actually cared for him, for the real him. Maybe he just lost himself in pretending for a moment. When he got back to the warehouse, he heard DJ pounce down onto the dumpster, and he felt her brush against his legs as she followed him inside, but he paid her no mind. He just kept walking and sat down in his nest of blankets. He didn't even bother to turn the lights on. He didn't bother to change into more comfortable clothes or take the eyeshadow off. He just sat there and stared into the darkness. He felt DJ settle down against his leg and rest her head on his thigh. Absent-mindedly, he carted his fingers through her fur. He could feel himself slipping into the familiar pit in his gut, but he couldn't be bothered to do anything about it right now. It was almost funny, the things that tipped him over that edge. It could be something so small, something so inconsequential. Just one domino falls, and suddenly he's back here. He didn't remember falling asleep, but he must have, because he woke up to a face full of DJ fluff. End of chapter.